Hello and welcome to the 2023 Environmental Justice Fund information session. Thank you for tuning in to learn more about the Environmental Justice Fund, the application process for this year. I am Jimena Fonseca-Morales. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Environmental Justice Fund Manager at the Office of Sustainability and Environment, and I will pass it to Sujan to introduce herself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sujin Chan. I am a consultant working with the Environmental Justice Fund and happy to be working with you. We also have this year a technical assistant consultant team, and I will introduce Karina, who is not able to join us today, but Karina is a cultural worker, artist, and has a long, deep experience working with nonprofits, and I'll pass it to Nanette.
Thanks, Sujan. Hi, everyone. I'm Nanette Falk. I use she, her pronouns. I work as a contract grant writer, so know very well the position that you all are in. I've also been involved with the Environmental Justice Fund across a couple of different rounds, supporting the implementation of it. So may have had the opportunity to meet some of you over the years. I look forward to meeting with and supporting you this year.
Thank you, Nanette. Before we dive into the logistics of this year's application process, I want to provide some context to ground us in the Environmental Justice Fund, which is a body of work that began back in 2018 and emerged from the Equity and Environment Agenda, which you see on the screen. This agenda really serves as a blueprint for the work that we are doing as a city in partnership with community to advance race and social justice for our environmental work in Seattle, really centering communities. And that is because Seattle has long been recognized as an environmental leader, and our Black, Indigenous, and communities of color, refugees, immigrants, and communities with low income have not always benefited from our environmental progress. One key principle of equity and environmental justice is that we ensure that those most affected by environmental inequities have a seat at the table when it comes to decision-making, program design, and oversight of our environmental efforts. So with that in mind, back in 2015, Mayor Murray at the time convened a group of 16 community members to serve on the Community Partner Steering Committee, and they worked closely with the Equity and Environment Initiative at the time to develop this agenda. Through that really deep engagement, 4 goals emerged, and they reflect community priorities to really advance environmental work in a way that centers equity and advances environmental justice for our communities most impacted. And so those goals are, starting from the top left, healthy environments for all, which is really about external conditions. It's about ensuring that community has access to clean air, clean water, to green spaces, safety, and a quality of life. And it's also about how we improve the environment while keeping people in place, how we understand and address cumulative environmental impacts, and how we address social economic conditions while understanding and improving multiple environmental pollutants and hazards that are impacting individuals' lives and their health. So this goal, we know, will take many partnerships with a variety of government agencies to be advanced and departments across the city for us to be able to address these issues. The second goal is on the top right, which is jobs, local economies, and youth pathways. And it's really about growing the green economy in a way that centers our BIPOC communities and youth so that they have a pathway to green careers. And the third goal is city programs, or equity in city environmental programs, which is at the bottom left of your screen. This goal is really about how we work as a city in partnership with community to ensure that they are collaborating with us, co-creating priorities that really center their lived experience, and that our work is really focusing on being responsive to those priorities and benefit everyone. The final goal is on the bottom right, environmental narrative and community leadership, which is really a recognition that the environmental narrative has traditionally excluded the voices, experiences, and solutions led by our BIPOC communities. And so this goal is really about infusing art and culture and creativity into all of our environmental approaches so that our communities see themselves reflected in the work which they have been leading. and they see how environmental justice really connects to their daily life. So these goals have been the foundation for the funding priorities of this program, which we will get into soon. But the next two items that I want to highlight is that two clear asks that emerged from the Equity and Environment agenda were, one, to create the Environmental Justice Committee, which is a group of community leaders who come together to really partner with the city to inform decision-making on programs that benefit or advance environmental justice and climate justice. That group of community members will partner with the Environmental Justice Fund to serve as a community review team. The second goal was actually this program. So the Environmental Justice Fund is another way that we have actioned community needs. They asked for the city to develop a dedicated funding pool that would directly invest in community-led projects for environmental justice and climate justice efforts. And so that is how this work emerged. Great. This work with the Environmental Justice Fund really starts from the place of understanding that race is the most significant predictor of a person living near contaminated air or water or soil. And so it is those environmental justice community members who worked closely with council back in 2018 to create this fund. And it is a grant opportunity to really support the efforts that benefit and are led by or in partnership with individuals who have been most impacted by environmental hazards and pollution, as well as inequities stemming from climate change impacts. For us, we define those communities specifically as being communities who identify as Black, Indigenous, communities of color, immigrants, refugees, people with low incomes, as well as youth and elders. Great, so digging into this year's application process, the fund has two dedicated options to submit project proposals. The first is the mid-sized project fund, and the second is the large project fund, which we will get into soon. This year, we have also added access to application technical assistance, which Nanette and Karina will be providing. We have also simplified and streamlined the application, further given feedback that we received from community partners, as well as our grantees. And we have included a written question and answer period into the application process, which now replaces the oral presentation period. If you have applied to the Environmental Justice Fund in the past, that will sound familiar to you. But this year, we will not be including a formal period for individuals who apply to meet with us and present their project in an oral presentation.
So as we talked about in 2023, we are going to have two different types of funds. The mid-size fund is going to be for grant projects ranging from $10,000 to $40,000 in size, and $250,000 will be available for that. And then we have $750,000 available for grant project sizes that range from $40,001 to $90,000. And the reason why we're doing two separate funds is to really be able to match a size for size grants against grants that are similar in kind of scope and complexity. The EJ Fund also supports a whole range of different projects and programming, and you'll see that theme come up as we continue to talk through the process about all the different types of things that we both support in terms of different types of projects and different communities. So you'll see that we are supporting groups at all different levels and different entry points in the environmental space. So we support new and emerging groups within the environmental and/or climate justice space, groups that have been around for a really long time, or groups that have been around for a long time but are just beginning to enter specifically the environmental space. So just to talk a little bit about eligibility, what we fund. Eligible projects and programs must focus on advancing climate and/or environmental justice. That is the key point of the Environmental Justice Fund. Programs and projects should be led by or be in deep partnership with those who are most impacted by environmental and climate inequities. And finally, the Environmental Justice Fund supports projects that primarily benefit those who live, work, learn, worship, and or play in the city of Seattle. Who should apply? Tribes, tribal organizations, nonprofit organizations, and community groups whose work is led by or in deep partnership with Black, Indigenous, people of color, immigrants, refugees, people with low incomes, youth, and or elders. Eligible projects must have their own 501c3 nonprofit status or have a fiscal sponsor with a 501c3 nonprofit status, or be willing to be able to secure a fiscal sponsor with the 501c3 nonprofit status by December 1st if they are awarded a grant. And if you are awarded the grant without having a fiscal sponsor secured, we'd be happy to help you with that during the contracting period. So we mentioned earlier that there's a wide range of different types of projects that are available and that we would support. That includes art and storytelling, to general operating support, to skill building, job pathways, etc. I won't read the whole list, but you will find this in the guidelines. You'll also find in the guidelines document some examples of what projects could look like. There are some ineligible activities and funding restrictions. The EJ Fund does not support individuals, scholarships, the purchase of land or buildings, capital projects including construction and renovation of facilities or site improvements, maintenance of existing facilities and physical improvements to not natural areas of parks or existing recreational facilities that do not have a clear environmental justice purpose. The EJ Fund also does not support projects that won't be accessible by the public. Purchase of equipment, including cameras, video, recording equipment, laptops, tablets, phones, cell phones, etc. However, the fund can support the rental of these types of equipment. And we do not support organizations' overhead costs that are not directly related to the EJ Fund project or program. If you have any questions about whether or not you think that a project or an expense or a group is eligible, please contact us and we'll give you the email at the end of our presentation. What is the difference between the two project funds? As we said, there's 250,000 available for the mid-size and 750 available for the large size. That kind of equates to about 7 to 9 awards anticipated for the mid-size and about 8 to 12 for the large size. In terms of application components, there's a slight difference as well. A project timeline and an organizational budget will be required for the large project fund. That's not required in the mid project fund application. However, if awarded in the mid-size, then during the contracting process, we'll help you complete the project timeline.
Great. In terms of how to apply, your home base for this application process will be our website, seattle.gov/environment/EJ Fund. That is where you will find the application link. The application this year has to be submitted via a SurveyMonkey form, and the landing page will include that application link, as well as links to 2 different worksheets. These worksheets have the narrative questions and additional organization questions that you will answer when you submit your proposal. There will be 1 worksheet for the mid-size project fund and 1 worksheet for the large size project fund. So make sure you use the correct one when you are collaboratively working on your proposals or just want to see a preview of what the application questions are. The attachments that you will need, including the project budget and the project timeline, if applicable, can also be found on our website. They are also on the first page of the SurveyMonkey form when you click into it, and that is the screenshot that you see on your screen. After the landing page, you will have to go through a few eligibility questions. And once you go through that, depending on your responses, you will be able to see the full application form. Now, there aren't intended to be any surprises. The eligibility questions are very much the same eligibility requirements that Sujan touched on earlier, and they are the ones that you can also find on the guidelines. If you have any questions about your eligibility, please reach out to us at equityandbarrow@seattle.gov, and we are glad to discuss with you. An important note is that SurveyMonkey does not often save your work, and we encourage you to please use the worksheets for each of the project funds to prepare your responses and to download the templates ahead of time and have those ready to upload. One note with the project budget specifically, it is available in Excel this year to make calculating the total amounts easier. However, SurveyMonkey will not allow you to upload an Excel sheet. So we ask you to please save that budget as a PDF and upload it. If you have any issues with that, please reach out to us at that same email, and we are glad to help you troubleshoot. In terms of technical assistance support, we have Nanette and Karina who will be able to provide expanded technical assistance to all eligible applicants. The type of support that they are able to provide is by discussing project ideas for EJ fund alignment. They are able to review draft proposals and provide feedback. They are also able to provide high-level edits on your draft. What they will not be able to help with is design your project idea or actually help with drafting the application responses. I want to note that we will be prioritizing requests based on the organizational size. So organizations that are maybe volunteer run or have very small staff teams, as well as smaller budgets, and or if the organization is led by individuals for whom English is a second language, they will be prioritized. Finally, if your organization could please allow 2 business days to be matched with a consultant, that would be great. And language interpretation will be available. We do ask that you please give us a little bit of time so that we can coordinate that assistance for language support with you, with the TA consultant, and the interpretation agency. The link that you see on your screen is the best link to be able to submit your technical assistance request. In terms of the application schedule, we are at the end of June at this point, so the info sessions have happened, and July 12th will be the last day to request technical assistance. So we really encourage you to go ahead and fill out that form to request technical assistance by then, so that we have enough time to match you with Nanette or Karina and connect with you before the application deadline, which is July 26th. It's a Wednesday, and the application will close at 5 p.m. Now, about the Q&A period that we mentioned earlier. In early August, the community review team will review all proposals, and by August 17th, they will send to us any questions that they may have, which we will then relay to you all. That will help inform their assessments of all the proposals. After that, you will have 2 weeks to submit your written responses if you receive any questions. And we ask that those be returned to us by August 30th. The review team will then go through their decision-making process, and we anticipate funding decisions will be emailed to everyone by November 6th. In terms of the contracting schedule, we will utilize the month of November through mid-December to really work with each of the selected awarded grantees on finalizing their project scopes, their timelines, and their budgets. If you are selected organization that needs to secure fiscal sponsorship, we will also make sure that you are able to secure that, and I can work with you to identify a fiscal sponsor if that is a need. Once the project's grant agreements are signed, the projects can begin. And it will likely be in January of 2024, and they must be completed by June 30th of 2025.
So to talk a little bit more about the review process, all eligible proposals will be reviewed by the review team members using the scoring rubric that we'll talk about in just a moment. The review team members will submit any additional or clarifying questions that they may have when they do their initial review, as mentioned before, and we'll send them to applicants during the Q&A period. And that's so to take a little bit of pressure off of y'all about having the, perfect, everything needs to be in order in the initial process. If there's anything that we still have questions about, or the review team members have questions about, there's another opportunity to get those responses back. And then again, you'll have until August 30th to provide those written responses. The review team uses a deliberative decision-making process to select a full portfolio, and it's going to be based on two different things: the strength of your individual proposals and a collective inclusion of a broad range of projects. As we mentioned before, EJ Fund is really, it's important value to support a wide range of different priorities, populations, project types, sizes. We want to be able to support groups that are newer to the space, as well as groups that have been funded in the past. We're both interested in broadening the impact as well as deepening the impact. So a whole different set of factors go into the final decision-making for the full portfolio of recommendations. The review team members will also have the right to recommend a different award amount from what was requested based on all of these different factors. And then finally, again, they will propose funding recommendations to the mayor's office, and the mayor's office will review that for final approval. So just to demystify a little bit about the scoring rubric, you'll see that each question has a theme, and then it is matched up with key indicators that we feel would be a strong response. So for instance, and we won't go through every single question, but for instance, the first narrative question asks about community need. Who is the community that you're serving? How is your community being impacted by climate change and or environmental hazards? And then you will see in the scoring rubric, there are key indicators that show a strong response. So your community is going to be clearly defined. The project directly serves one or more of the EJ Fund's priority communities that's been named a few times in this info session so far. And your response clearly demonstrates a deep understanding of your community's needs as driven by environmental and or climate inequities. So the second narrative question is about community leadership. And again, who designed the project, and if different, who is leading the project. And then again, you will see on the scoring rubric, the strong key indicators for the response. So as you're preparing your proposal, we really strongly encourage you to look at these strong key indicators in the scoring rubric and see if they have been answered in your response. The next one is about project description. What will you do and how will you do it? The fourth narrative question is about project milestones. And here we're just really encourage you to just use bullet points. We're not looking for a long, fancy narrative. Just what are the key milestones for your project? There's a slight difference between the project outcomes questions for the mid-sized project fund and the large project fund. For the mid-sized one, we're asking what are your project outcomes and how will they address the inequities and impacts that you named in the first narrative questions about community need. The large project outcomes questions is a little bit more specific. We're asking for 3 specific outcomes for your project and how you define success for your project and how will you know if your efforts are successful. Finally, our last narrative question is about racial justice. As we opened up the info session, we know that race is the key leading indicator on whether or not a community is experiencing inequities due to climate change and or environmental injustices. So this question really gets at that. What are the practices and approaches that your organization or group are doing to advance in racial justice, and how do you measure that success in the work that you're doing? So we've provided an example, a template for a project budget, and here's just an example of what your income side could look like. You'll see on the top that the first thing you should just talk about is the environmental justice fund proposal and how much you're asking. That's in yellow. And here's just some examples of what the rest of your income example could look like. Again, this is just for demo purposes only. This is not meant to be a guideline for how you should report your income. For example, in this imaginary example, there's a foundation that's funding some of the costs that are not eligible in the EJ fund. There's a government grant to help support some stipends, and maybe there's a little fundraising event that's going to bring in a few extra dollars to help with general operating expenses. Here's an example of what the expenses side could look like. And you'll see at the top, outreach team stipends. Let's say your project for $45,000 will include $40,000 that will just go to supporting the stipends for the outreach team. And you'll see there that on the very first line, because you're asking for that from the Environmental Justice Fund, in the third column over, you'll also say that $40,000 is coming from the Environmental Justice Fund. And then there's a number of expenses that, let's say, are being covered by other grants or other pieces of income. And then towards the end, you see another piece of your project, let's say, that might be supported, that $5,000 for the fiscal sponsor fee. And then again, you'll see down below in the yellow, you have $45,000 that should match up with the income side of your project budget. And here again is just an example of what a project timeline could look like. Again, only large project fund applications right now we're requesting a project timeline for, and here's just an example of what one could look like. It's mostly going to have your major milestones, and it really just shows the level of like planning and thinking that you've figured out for how the project will be executed. And the scoring rubric for the attachments, similarly, there are some strong key indicators. Again, we just really encourage you to take a really good look at that scoring rubric and see how they line up with the responses or the attachments that you're providing.
Again, we have various resources available for interested applicants, and we encourage you to head to our website to find all of these resources, which are also linked here. But we have our worksheet where you can see the full application for the mid-sized project as well as the large project funding levels. Nanette and Karina are available for technical consultants, so we encourage you to reach out to them. There's also access to Sujan and myself to answer any clarifying questions that you may have, and you can reach out to us via email at equityenviro@seattle.gov. We will provide language interpretation, so we are glad to also receive those requests via emails. If you would require technical assistance in your preferred language, please let us know in the form as well. Soon we will have sample responses of strong proposal narrative questions on the website. So if you could head to our website, you will find those examples there for reference only as you draft your own proposal. And finally, we wanted to flag some current funding opportunities that may be of interest to you. First is the Duwamish River Opportunity Fund, which is currently open and will close on August 7th, also at 5 p.m. This is an opportunity specifically for community-led existing programs and projects that are focused on responding the challenges faced by Duwamish River communities to improve their quality of life and the health of the communities there. The second is the King Conservation District Seattle Community Partnership Grant, which is currently open and will close on August 9th. That funding opportunity is for community-led projects that support environmental equity and protect our natural resources and or food systems. We have worked closely with the lead of the King Conservation District Seattle Community Partnership Grant to really streamline the narrative questions. So you will see some similarities as you work through those proposals if you choose to submit a proposal, and encourage you to think about how you might be able to use some of the responses that you pulled together for your EJ Fund proposal for those other two funding opportunities. Again, if you have any questions about eligibility, please email us at equityandbiro@seattle.gov. If you would like to seek technical assistance with Nick or Karina, here is the link again to request that assistance. And finally, we encourage you to visit our website to view the application guidelines and access all other resources that we mentioned during this session. Thank you so much, and we look forward to meeting you and reading about the incredible work that you're leading.